And we're live.
Fantastic.
Mr. Mark Dundon.
Lee, how are you?
I'm so excited to have you on the podcast, dude. I cannot tell you how excited I have been in the lead up to this, just because you and I have some amazing conversations. And I've always wished that other people could hear the conversations that we have. And now we have the opportunity to do that.
Sounds good. Tune in, everyone.
Yeah, right.
Check it out.
So for anyone who doesn't know who you are, I mean, they've clearly been living under a rock. Other than being the most humble person I've met in coffee ever.
Yeah.
Tell me how it started for you.
Well, I was an artist. I was a fine artist, and basically I sort of needed to, I was just about to have a family, and this was like 20 years ago. So I sort of needed to get into some sort of, job. So because I just wasn't making as much money out of art as I should be to survive. So I had a small bar for a year, 2 years, and then my wife was pregnant, and I thought, look, I'd love to do a small little cafe. Because of the social thing, I really enjoyed, talking to people and looking after people. So, we were living in a little suburb, Brunswick, and I decided to open just a small little cafe there, which I really enjoyed. It was great. It was fantastic. We opened, I suppose it was around a 25-seat, 30-seat cafe, so quite small.
Mm-hmm.
The area was predominantly a migrant area of Turkish and Lebanese, Italian and Greek people who had moved into the suburb.
Them is my people.
That's right. But yeah. And it was a suburb that was a bit down and out, back then. It's pretty groovy now, but back then it was, somewhere that wasn't so fantastic. But we really liked it because it was a place that we could, live and get into the community. And we had a great experience with all, the actual people who were supplying us food, or the producers, or things like that. So we had a great time with, Muhammad Ali, the vegetarian, the veggie guys, and all that sort of stuff. And we used to go and get out, Turkish bread in the morning off the guys at the ovens and all that sort of stuff. So it was a really interesting sort of, dynamic. And the people that were coming into the neighborhood then were, I suppose, people who were being moved out from inner city, the closer inner city. So there was this sort of interaction between these communities. And at the cafe, we served a lot of local produce. And so everyone sort of liked us a little bit because we were introducing people to, all these different things, but also there was a really nice dynamic in the cafe. So it was great. I really enjoyed it and got into it.
When you say a nice dynamic in the cafe, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think it was a very good mix of people coming in. There was a very diverse group of people coming in. And I think it sort of embodied, that little area, which was nice. We were in a fairly bad area of town. There was a little bit of gangster stuff going down.
Really?
Yeah, there was like a little sort of card gambling den just above us, like down the road, like two doors down.
That's awesome.
And the police were surveilling them one day, and I went and told them, and they said, "Mark, you never get robbed. You'll never get robbed."
I got to tell you this story. When my parents owned a petrol station, same kind of thing, and I was in university at the time, and I was doing the till 10. It was a 24-hour servo. Servo's a gas station for anyone who doesn't know. And so it was I would do the shift from like 5 in the afternoon after university till 10 p.m. at night. After I'd finish, I'd fill my tank of gas and take it home. And I would notice whenever I did that, my car would get stolen.
Okay, right.
And then get found at the local shopping mall in the same fucking parking spot every single time. Like these guys would take it and leave it so that I would know where to find it.
Yeah.
A couple of years later, just take the fuel. That's all they wanted. A couple of years later, this guy comes into the servo while I'm on my shift. And I had reported it to the cops, and I said to them, listen, I think that these guys are taking it, the same people are taking it every couple of weeks because the cars just returned empty. A couple of years later, this guy comes into the servo and he says, did you have the Toyota Corona Mark II, the grey one? I'm like, yeah. He says, and I won't name the name of the gang, they always got your back. Whatever you want, you just get in contact with any of us and we got you. I'm like, holy fuck. Nothing ever happens to me after that.
No, exactly. So, yeah, so it was a good little neighborhood, you know, and I really, you know, enjoyed, you know, the cafe. And like, I think for me, looking at, you know, that produce and stuff like that, I started to wonder about the coffee, you know, and really looked at, you know, what was happening with the coffee. And, you know, I wanted to know a lot more about it. It seemed to be this thing that was a mystery. Like I think in Melbourne at the time, you sort of had to be Italian to roast coffee.
Right.
So it was that sort of vibe, really.
What year was this?
This was 2000.
Okay.
So yeah. Yeah.
What was the name of the cafe?
It was called Ray.
Ray?
Yeah. Yeah.
What a fucking great name. Well, where did it come from?
Everyone thought I was Ray.
Of course.
I'd be going to the supermarket and stuff like that. And like, hey, Ray, how are you? You know. So,
yeah, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I know Ray.
Yeah, everyone knows Ray, even the gangsters upstairs.
Exactly. So
and you never got robbed.
Never got robbed. No, there's a few incidents where things happened, some strange shit happened, but like, yeah, we never got robbed.
You either got to be in with the police or the criminals. One of the two, and you're fine. But you can't be neutral on that shit. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, you're fair game. You're neutral.
Absolutely. So I first came across you. I was working at Campos in Sydney at the time. I was a couple of years into my career, and everyone was talking to me about this place called St. Ali. And I hadn't been to Melbourne before. And I said to my husband at the time, we've got to go to Melbourne. There's this cafe that everybody's talking about. And everyone's saying it's nothing like any other cafe that's existed. So let's go. So we went to Melbourne for my first trip there. And I remember my favorite thing about your cafe was the water bottles and the chairs that hung from the ceiling.
Oh, this was Brother you went to, Brother, which is in...
Is that... the chairs in the ceiling was Brother Buba Budan?
That's right, yeah.
And but which one had the beer bottles that were water bottles?
That was Brother and St. Ali, yeah.
Yeah, so St. Ali was the first time. And I remember back then, you were the only one that was doing it. From what I understood, in Sydney, nobody was doing it. But there were the beer, do they call them 40s over here?
Probably, yeah, or something like that.
Weird 40-ounce bottle or whatever. That was what was using as the water bottles. But I remember going into St. Ali and to Brother Buba Budan. We went all around, and I started to realize that this was going to be a real shift in the way people experienced the whole coffee experience. And that was when I started to realize this is something different than normal cafes. We've got a very well-established cafe culture in Australia, but did you know it was going to be different?
Yeah, I think to me, I wanted it to be different. Like I sold Ray and went and set up St. Ali because no one was really exploring coffee, you know, in regards to what was happening elsewhere, I think. So yeah, I just wanted to know about it. I wasn't trying to be, a lot of people thought I was pretentious and, going off to do this.
So pretentious.
Yeah. Like people said people were actively hostile towards me because I thought I could roast coffee, and because I hadn't been through some sort of apprenticeship. Like you couldn't go and cup coffee anywhere. You couldn't really learn about, roasting coffee in Australia. So I went to the States, before setting up St. Ali. So to me, it was like I think you sort of had to be, well, I don't know whether you had to be born into it or whatever, but it was very difficult to actually roast coffee, you know, to take that step in Australia. It was unheard of, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to the States and, you know, I got a small 5 kilo roaster and put it into Sonali, and, you know, the approach was very different. It was in a back street, you know, a little bit like Ray, where it was, you know, hidden away in a bad area of town. Mm-hmm. You know, I could tell if it was going to be successful by whether my mother cried when I took her to the site that I was proposing. But yeah, so, you know, with Sonali, it was great to actually start roasting coffee and starting to really look at, you know, what happens and all those sort of experiments and things like that, you know. So it was good. It was a good thing to go, and we focused on that because I suppose we just wanted to really explore it.
Explore the whole side of it, how to roast coffee and what the flavor was.
Yeah, like I think really to look at, you know, different approaches to, you know, I suppose coffee in Australia. Like no one was really drinking filter coffee. You know, it was mainly espresso, and a lot of it was very Italian. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, but it was very one D. And to me, it was just really a little bit to the SCAA, and I, you know, had done a couple of courses, you know, one with Mene Alves and one with, you know, a few other, you know, just private guys over there, and had joined, you know, a couple of excellence because I figured that it would be great to get coffees that were fairly well known and that were of quality, so you could sort of try and reproduce quality, whether it be, you know, in a small amount in Australia, and really look at celebrating some of those coffees, hopefully. And it was a training exercise, you know, if you could really get a good result out of that coffee, because you knew the coffee was good, you just had to really, you know, make sure you could do the right thing in the roaster. So all those things in the early years were great, you know, great training tools and things like that for me to really, you know, get a handle on coffee. And I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic to see all this diversity, and as you immerse yourself into, you know, coffee culture, it's great to really, you know, meet a whole lot of people. Like it's this very small world, the coffee world.
Isn't it?
And yeah, it is. It is. And really genuinely, you know, people I think are, you know, excited by coffee. It's nice to be around people who are excited by coffee and exploring it as well. So yeah, so it was good. You know, like Sonali was great. It was hard work, you know. They were all a lot of hard work to get going.
What do you mean, mate? You've got a business and you do nothing. You just you just make it rain and then count all the money in your bank. Isn't that right?
Right. We had my son, and I worked for the next 9 months, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. And it was the same with Sonali. And like back then, you know, it wasn't really, there was no social media or anything like that. So it was basically word of mouth. So you could, I think was a good thing, because you could see, you know, an increase, and it wasn't like a fly by night. People would discover it and then they'd bring somebody back, you know, a couple of days later. So it was a very organic growth. And it was a good growth because people wouldn't introduce their friends to it if they thought their friends wouldn't like it. It had to be something that was, you know, so there was a little bit more discerning into who came in to the shop, rather than being, you know, a blanket social media post where everyone turns up on the first day
and then nothing.
That's right. So expects it to be banging. So yeah. So
fuck the soft opening, right?
Exactly. We're just going to go hard in. It's like we opened one place in Fitzroy, and there was 4 reviews up by 9 a.m. on the first day.
Holy shit.
And it was like, you know,
no pressure.
No, well, yeah, but it was a race. You know, people were racing to be the first to report on that place. You know, so yeah. But
what's
anyway.
it like when you open a place now? Is it that same kind of shit?
Well, it's sort of like, it's gone back to that because social media is just such white noise now.
Yeah.
That people are really ignoring that side of things, I think, more so now. And really going back to some of the old school, you know, word of mouth, you know, introductions, because there's just so much stuff, you know, happening. But yeah.
Do you have a cookie cutter approach with regards to opening and the release strategy behind something like that? That always intrigues me about how people get that stuff done.
No, I look, you know, for us, it's always a considered approach from whatever, you know, like the reality is that I have a few little business things going on and they are different. So it's always nice to really look at it in its own, I suppose, situation and entity. So opening, you know, Paramount, you know, Coffee Project downtown was very different to opening, you know, like a Seven Seeds account or things like that, just because of, you know, different country, different, you know, approach, different vibe, just to the actual location as well. So yeah.
Let's talk about that. The idea of taking. I hesitate to use the word your brand, being you, but you came over to the States. You and I did that around the same time. And you came to the States, and was it what you expected or was it very different?
It's always different. I think whenever you think you've got something nailed, you know, that's when you're going to be very, very wary.
The universe says, hey, fuck you.
That's right. That's true. Like, I think, you know, we had done Paramount in Sydney, and that was like, you know, I thought that would be really, really difficult because it was in like the foyer of a building and a lot of things that rang on. It was very much, and I thought it would make, you know, no money. It would be, you know, a problem child. But the reality was pretty much the opposite. It was really well respected.
It's a beautiful store.
Well, it's a nice store, but the concept behind it, like, you know, roasting coffee, you know, in Melbourne, and, you know, Russ from Reuben Hills roasting in Sydney, and then, you know, teaming up and saying, let's do something completely different and look at everyone else's roasting, you know, roasting and people around the world, what they're doing with cafe culture. It was really, really interesting for us, and really, you know, it was a nice invigoration to really, you know, engage, you know, that coffee community. And we still have, you know, really dear friends from that with, you know, G&B, Coffee Collective, you know, Square Mile, and all those people who interacted with the project. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Which is the first one we opened, really chose that location because it was small and we really needed to understand a little more about, you know, the culture in LA. And so I think we, you know, there's a few things we knew that it would be different to what we expected, just because it always is. And I think it was, you know, quite different in regards to culture, you know, culturally, the way people expect to, you know, drink coffee and things like that. And we definitely got some things wrong. I think, you know, from a service perspective in Australia, we're very used to being served. Like, you know, if you go into a cafe in Australia, it's like, you know, hey, dude, we're going to look after you. You know, here's your table, here's all that sort of stuff. You know, and that's what you expect in Australia. In, you know, and specifically LA, people don't want to be looked after. People want to do their own looking after. They want to be able to line up, because a lot of, you know, that interaction in the queue is what, you know, Angelino's particularly like. I don't want to be told where to fucking sit. You know, I'm going to sit here, and then I'm going to sit over there, and I'm going to go and talk to her, and then I'm going to do this. Like, how dare you tell me where the fuck to sit? You know? So, and I think work here for the day, and I think it was quite shocking to a lot of people when we said, you know, no, you're not going to work here for the day. We don't have Wi-Fi, and we don't do that. So a lot of people were mortified. But, you know, for us, it was important to really have a fusion of cultures in LA, like, you know, to bring a little bit of us and to bring a little bit of, you know, the US into play. So Fairfax was a good opportunity to look into that. And I think looking at the new store downtown, I think you can see, you know, the changes that we've made in regards to that sort of service aspect.
I can't wait to go to the new store because I haven't been to LA since you've opened, but I'm going for Coffee Fest. So I'm going to organize a couple meetings there just so I can make sure that I get to it.
Check it out.
Yeah, for sure. Is it true to your whole thing whereby a new space, a new approach, or is it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, like I think maybe like I think that's probably something I don't consciously think of. Like I think we're always adapting what we do. So yeah, I think it's like, I suppose it's not just cafes that we've done. Like we've moved our roastery in Melbourne, and so that approach has been very, very different just from just the different process. Like we're roasting wholesale, we've got offices. And I think looking at the layout and design of that takes, a very different approach, of course, than a cafe. But it's equally as important, and I place the same sort of things on it. But again, I think we approach the same thing with when we're designing a store or whatever, depending where it's situated, how you get in and out of the building, and what you want to provide, So yeah.
How are you guys working up with parking there downtown? That must be a clusterfuck.
Well, no, it's in a big development. So it's a big it's a big development. It's a huge.
So you've got that sorted.
Yeah, that's sorted. So it's more of I suppose it's almost like an outdoor shopping centre, to be completely honest. So yeah, so it's big. It's big.
Is it a multi-roaster?
Yes, but we do have a roaster installed. We'll be roasting ourselves as well.
Who's going to be doing the roasting down there?
Well, we'll do a little bit. Like the roasting side of things will be a little different. We have one.
Hey Max, say that again. Sorry, it's glitching from my end. So who's going to be doing the roasting? Sorry.
So basically, we have a staff member who will roast, but we will also have people who are coming in from overseas. So, for instance, if the Coffee Collective were to come in and want to do some roasting in LA, for a short time, maybe with a producer or two, that was, it would be great to do something like that.
Yeah.
So hopefully, we want to change a few things with the roasting, because I think it's, roasting coffee is entering a very interesting time at the moment, and I think it would be good to highlight, some of the aspects about changing things up. It would be great to have 3 or 4 roasters roasting the same coffee and presenting that and their interpretations. Yeah, it would be great to have overseas roasters coming in on a rotation basis and doing some stuff as well. So giving them the opportunity to maybe experience a market that they hadn't experienced before. So yeah, that sort of vibe.
I think this is probably the best segue we're going to get to the article that you wrote and posted onto LinkedIn, given that we're talking about some changes happening in roasting and coffee. Yeah. Could we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think it all came from a tweet to a certain extent. So I suppose some stuff that we were doing here. And I was looking at the dynamic in Melbourne about, there's a lot of roasters out there who, are saying their specialty, and I was thinking to myself, what is specialty? Really what do people think, that specialty is? And I just thought, I cannot use the word specialty ever again,
I was writing your bio and I had to consciously not put the word specialty anywhere near your bio.
Yeah. Well, I just, there's companies there selling coffee for so cheap, saying how great they are, for the coffee industry and how they're helping the planet and coffee farmers and things like that. And it's just bullshit. It's just utter bullshit. Like when I got involved with COE at the very beginning, Melbourne hadn't really gone through that third wave boom. And I think I was just lucky from a timing perspective to be around at that time. But the reality was, and then I think doing some work with COE, I met a lot of producers in a lot of countries that we buy coffee off, and we got really, really friendly. And they were like, hey, you know, Melbourne's so fantastic. It's going so well. You know, it's great to see all these roasters coming out and starting to visit us and buying coffee and stuff like that. But the reverse has happened in recent years where, you know, I'm getting phone calls and saying, hey, you know, such and such is here and he wants to buy coffee, you know, plus 30 on the C. You know, and I feel like I'm almost responsible to a certain extent for, you know, those people who are, you know, buying bad coffee or buying coffee that's actually really cheap, you know, and based on commodity pricing. So to me, I feel cafe pressures and things like that have made the marketplace in Australia, in Melbourne, you know, go to a very cheap spot for buying green. And still everyone's marketing or everyone's, you know, word is specialty or how great they are.
Let's break that down more specifically, because that article really did have a big effect on the way that I look at the way that I use the word specialty. And it's affected my business model, quite honestly. Yep. Because after I read that article and you and I had a conversation about it, excuse me, I started contacting our roasters to find out their approach with regards to the coffees that they buy, and have started talking to them about which farms do you actually have relationships with? What are those relationships like? And the ones where you have long-term kind of arrangements with those farms, they're the ones that we want for Elixir. So can you unpack what the real problem that we're facing as an industry is?
Well, specifically, you know, coffee prices have gone down. You know, since this third wave, since, you know, we've been involved in all of this sort of stuff, since there's been, you know, the World Barista Championships, you know, whatever you want to say, you know. The boom of all this coffee-related stuff, coffee prices to the producer have gone down. Most people are not paid minimum wage for coffee, let alone, you know, starting to talk, like if you're talking about, you know, cost of production and things like that of coffee, you know, like really ask yourself, what does that mean, cost of production? Like it just means you're breaking even with coffee.
Right.
And a lot of people are, you know, like in Honduras, it costs us between $1.50 to $1.80 to produce a pound of coffee. And that's what people are want to buy coffee at. The C's at $1.07. You know, the C market is at $1.07. So if people want to see a future in coffee, they need to pay more for coffee. It's as simple as that. They don't need to be buying coffee that's going to make people go, fuck coffee. You know, I'm going to plant bananas. I'm going to plant avocados. And I think the coffee world at a retail level is very short-sighted. There's this remove process to origin. People need to recognize that, you know, this product is really, you know, handmade. It's very artisan from all its nature and things like that. It costs me $12 to go and get a beer, you know.
Right.
And then it's like, you know, it's like water, herbs, and malt. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's like done just down the road in a steel vat.
Yeah.
$12 for this shit, you know what I mean? Like if you look at the process that coffee goes through, it's an intense, you know, journey, and we need to stand up for it more, and we need to really fight for the right of producers who want to continue on with coffee. You know, there's not a lot of young people going in to coffee. A lot of, you know, that's right. You know, that's right.
When we're not giving them as a future.
Yeah. Like, you know, I had a Colombian girl say to me, like, it's groovy, you know, in Melbourne, it's groovy in LA to be in coffee. In Colombia, it's shit, you know. Yeah. We want to go to Bogota and hang out and have, you know, the same sort of life that you guys have. I want to go out. I want to, you know, do all this sort of stuff, you know, like normal middle-class people. So it's important for us to really, I suppose, understand what's happening at origin. that if you look at, you know, these places, that a lot of them are going through transformation in regards to, you know, more and more middle-class people, and coffee's just going to be left for dead, realistically, especially if we don't have the respect, you know.
Let's talk about that word in particular. I really started to get an understanding for the lack of respect that's perceived from the farm about how we, at the other end of the supply chain, there's a real disconnect between that from what I'm understanding. Am I hearing that right?
Yeah, no, there is a disconnect. Like, I think, like I don't really understand why there is that. Like, it becomes very colonialistic when people go to origin. And I think that that's a real problem. Like, you know, an exporter was showing me an email from someone, you know, complaining that they weren't picked up on a 4-wheel drive and that they weren't, you know, had this done to them and things like that. And it's like, there's this expectation of when you go to origin that you're going to wander around, you're going to tell people a little bit about how to do this or how to do that, and you're going to really, you know, go into this situation where you're cupping coffees and approving and disapproving. I think, you know, all of that is, you know, probably not the best way to really go. Do you know what I mean?
A little bit of humility goes a long way, doesn't it?
Well, then at the end, say I want it for $1.90 a pound. It's like, you know,
right. It's the biggest fuck you in the world.
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's really, really problematic, you know. Like, I think for us, you see a lot of people who are quite successful by, I suppose, being educated in regards to, like, we had a couple of guys come out and work with us for a while, a couple of producers work with us. And I think that's
in
really
what capacity?
Well, they worked in the cafe.
Oh, wow.
We had Felipe who came out from FAF.
Oh, yes.
And so
Felipe Cross, right?
Yeah. So he came out and worked with us, and you know, went back and opened some cafes and did all that sort of stuff, and had a, you know, we had Raul from La Soledad in Guatemala come out and work with us. And I think, you know, it's very important for producers to come and visit us and really look at what we're doing and question us about the representation, about, you know, what we're doing with their coffee. You know, I think it shouldn't be two-way. You know, like, to me, it would be ideal to change the whole way we market. Well, the whole way we work with coffee. You know, the contract.
How would you do it different?
I'd like to do it digitally. You know, I'd like to make
we spoke about this, didn't we? The blockchain thing.
But digital transparency, but transparent both ways. So they can see what you're selling. And, you know, so to have, you know, an opportunity to really, you know, follow it all the way through. And if it's going through an exporter or it's going past, you know, Anna Cafe who are clipping it, you know, on the way out of Guatemala or whatever, like, you have to be a realist about the way, you know, things are traded and look at it. And I think it would be great to have the opportunities to show to the farmer, you know, this is a great coffee, you know, we can sell it for more, you know, people are buying it, and see that confidence go back to them, you know, with having a little more understanding of how that coffee performed and how it went at a retail level. Like, I think it almost should be a team exercise, you know, between the producer and the roaster to take that product to retail.
Excuse me. So it's almost like a, I don't know, a collaboration, a true collaboration.
Yeah, well, like last year we did a little thing with a Colombian producer. He had a varietal tabby that we thought was exceptional. He wanted $3.50 a pound for it. And we gave him $3.50 a pound. We said, that's fantastic. We think it deserves more. And he was like, no, it was a small amount. And so we said to the exporter, he said, what we're going to do is we're going to put a tip to producer on the counter.
I love it.
And so we did that because we just said, look, we think this coffee's a stunner. You know, we reckon it's great. If you think the same thing, this will go back to the farmer and we'll match the tip that you send back to him.
That's fucking awesome, dude.
So it was good. It worked really well, which is, I think, is a very simple example of trying to return a little bit of that. Like, it's not going to be perfect for everyone, you know, but I think it's really important to engage the consumer on different levels of quality and really, you know, I suppose trying to be discerning or just engaging in that and understanding about things like that. And I think it's a good start to really introduce a different pricing philosophy to the consumer.
So here's my disconnect with some of it. As I guess I've never roasted, but as someone from the cafe, as the barista, I always found that if we're talking straight, the customers rarely give a fuck about the farmer. They just want to come in, especially, I hesitate to say especially in Australia, but that's where I've had the majority of my barista career. But especially in Australia, people have got 30 seconds. They want you to be focused on them. They give zero fucks about anything you're going to tell them about the altitude of a coffee or who the farmer is. And you've got to get them out there quickly. And I always was trying to find ways to talk to people about the farmers. And what I found was that the passive marketing was the best way to do that. I almost feel like we need to find a new way to help that conversation get to people. Or is it that the people who need to give a fuck about the farmer are actually our community rather than necessarily the coffee drinking community?
I think there's a couple of problems. I think specialty as a word has been usurped by a whole lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a whole lot of people out there who are buying commodity coffee and marketing it as specialty. So I think
do you think that's happening?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I didn't know that was happening. Yeah. So that's a big problem? That's
a big problem. So people are buying coffee for under, $2 a pound. And this is FOB, mm-hmm. I forget, to the producer, for their blend or whatever, and having their 2 bags of, Panama Geisha at the front door,
right?
Just to use for marketing. It's in the marketing budget. But the reality is that we need to pay proper price for coffee that really allows producers to be confident in their future and also, make a choice that they want to grow coffee. And I think, people doing that are being really dishonest to themselves about, like maybe the consumer, isn't that savvy, especially in Australia where the drinking mm-hmm. culture has come from, Italian espresso, either sweetened by milk or have 2 sugars floating on top of your crema. Mm-hmm. But as we see a filter coffee drinking public, become more and more, popular in Australia, I think, quality is becoming more and more, becoming more and more, a thing for sure. So to me, I think you really need to be able to have some way of discerning what is quality, what is, whether you call it specialty or high end. And I think the only way to do that is transparency, to have some transparency.
It almost sounds like, do you need to say something to someone who's walked in?
No, it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. It's just, I was in a meeting earlier with these guys, so they've just finished up, but I'll go into it.
Cool. It almost sounds like what we need is, the organic, USDA approved organic, certified organic. It almost sounds like we need something like that. That's an official thing.
Organic is this, you can discern what organic is. It has to be registered. The farm has to be, fair trade's the same thing. All those things quantifiable. Specialty is not. So the problem I have with the SCA is that,
standards, or the lack thereof.
I was in Amsterdam and coming down the escalator, and the guy in front of me was wearing a T-shirt, sanctioned by World Coffee Events, sanctioned by SCAA, all these different things going on. The thing that I don't want to sanction is the actual coffee. Yes. So, no one's willing to stand up and fight for quality coffee and put some real things in place in regards to what specialty coffee is. And it will destroy those organizations because they're not representing coffee. They're representing, all these other things. All these other things around coffee, but the coffee itself is really crying out, and the difficulty is that due to the dollar bills, no one is really willing to do it. So unfortunately, the only real way is by, I suppose, just revealing what, like at 7 Seeds, I think we'll just reveal what we do. We'll really look towards, showing, pricing to as far back as we can go. Like, for instance, you know, in Colombia, we can show back to producer, what we actually pay the producer. We can look at calculations looking at, you know, what cost of production is in different areas, you know, Nariño, Pitalito, all, you know, all those different spots. I think that's a real detail map, and that's through Tyler at Azahar, who's done all that research. So it makes it really good for us to make an understanding of the impact that we're doing. When it comes to places like Ethiopia and Kenya, it's a little more difficult because of the union and, you know, the dynamic there. But I think it's important to make an effort to try and get back as far as you can to look at your impact and what you're doing at origin.
And the farmers are okay with you revealing the prices that you're paying?
Yeah, yeah.
Because Onyx Coffee are doing the same thing. Onyx Coffee Lab are doing the same thing as you. They reveal everything that it costs them. They're letting everyone know exactly what they pay. This is John Allen. Do you know John Allen?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
think you'll see.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you'll see that starting to come into play. Like, I think the reality is it's one of the only ways for us really to show, difference. Like, specialty means nothing.
Who do you think is going to be interested in that data?
Well, I think once there's, I think, you know, with millennials or, you know, those sort of people who are very concerned about, you know, environment and, you know, just the way product and, you know, sustainability, all those things, I think they are. I think definitely if you can tell, you know, a story and discern, you know, make them, you know, able to look at your brand compared to someone else who's like, look at what's happening at origin, I think you can definitely get advantage, you know. I don't think we can, you know, we don't really want to charge anymore. I'm going to go into the boardroom with you now, if that's okay, Lee.
Yeah, of course.
There's Bridgie.
Hi, Bridget. Good to see you, lovely. You got a nice little setup up there near the boardroom.
I was just in the training room, so yeah.
Nice. So it's almost as though we need to start making it part of the story.
Well, yeah, I can't at this stage see any other way. Like, there's a few, like I went and attended the actual Hamburg, you know, Transparency Colloquium, which was a very interesting dynamic. Like, I think in regards to that, there's a lot of people who want to do the same thing. A lot of people who have started Intelligentsia, obviously one of the very early adopters of direct trade and having a policy on doing that. But, you know, there is initiatives into having a third party validate contracts, you know, because not everyone wants to be transparent, you know, showing everything. And I think that's another alternative in regards to having a contract sanction that it's actually going to be, you know, great to the producer, or not great, but like, you know, that's a fair process back to the, you know, producer. So I think things like that are exciting.
Mark, because when Christopher Ferran was on this podcast, going back a few weeks, he was talking about how the way that Phoenix Coffee are approaching this kind of a thing is that he goes to Origin as the green buyer and co-owner of Phoenix. When he goes to Origin, he establishes long-term contracts with the farms and then has like a sliding scale so that if they do extra things, he will pay more per pound and is happy to do so, so that, you know, guarantees a better quality coffee. And after that podcast, we got contacted by a few people that were saying, I can't afford to go to Origin. But I do want to start contributing to making sure that the supply chain is starting to get looked after. So how can people who are smaller roasters, how can they start to influence? Because I'm starting to think that if we have more smaller roasters that are doing this, as they grow, it starts to have a bigger impact, right?
It does. A lot of smaller roasters, like if you look at, I can pretty much, like a lot of smaller roasters, like it has just exploded into a group of small roasters.
It really has.
And a lot of that is about their brand. Like when you look at a lot of things that are happening on social media about coffee, it's more about brand rather than product.
Absolutely.
So I think that that's problematic, you know, because of the fact that people are really looking at, they're not really interested in coffee. Like we have some guys here in Melbourne who are roasting with the local, small roasting collective. Yeah, and to a certain extent, it's about saving money and it's about actually their brand. You know, I'm in there and saying, what coffees do you really like? What are you excited about? You know, and they're like, it's really about us, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's not a great approach. And I think they feel like they can't get involved because it is, you know, a couple of grand to go to Origin and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, I would actually challenge anyone to get out there and ask questions, you know, who they're buying their green off. Like, for instance, you know, Onyx, you're talking about, you know, in the States. There are people who really want to, you know, show, you know, a trial back to Origin and, you know, prices paid. I think there's people who are starting to really do that. And most people who we've asked have been quite willing to actually show, you know, that sort of transparency. And I think you've just got to ask. You know,
what kind of questions? These guys are really confused about what they should be asking.
Well, I think, you know, when you look at the way coffee's traded, if you went to, you know, to an importer in the States and they were charging, you know, a particular, you know, coffee at a particular pound price, you know, let's say it was $4.50 a pound green, you know, out of, you know, LA, you know, I would be asking, you know, what price, you know, is going to the producer, you know, roughly, you know, like what are we talking about? Like, where the government organization's getting a clip. A lot of people don't want to tell you because of the fact that their clip is a huge margin of the whole coffee.
Okay.
So basically, you know, if the farm, like for that $4.50 coffee, the risk for an importer is fairly high, you know, because of the fact that some coffee arrives and it's not as it should be or whatever. So let's say, you know, 1 in 10 containers, you know, like say you have a 10% loss on coffee, you know, a lot of people don't understand, you know, the dynamic. So when you put it down all on a pie chart about the costs to the importer and to the exporter, it looks fairly massive compared to the producer. But I think if you can reasonably assess that and look at what the producer needs to actually survive, I think you can make some informed decisions. Like for the small roaster, just speak to the importer about what's happening. And there are a lot of coffee, you know, brokers in the States who are doing a great job. You know, they'll have coffee there, which will be, you know, fantastic and paying the producer a great price, but they'll probably also have, you know, commodity coffee or coffee that's priced a lot lower. And I think it's important as a roaster to understand the difference between those two.
Is it possible, do you think, that people who are starting out can be focused from, you know, from when the gate opens on helping to transform this? Or do you think that we've already lost the game?
Like the word I get, you know, from around town is that, like, if you go to producing, you know, countries, there's a huge focus on selling to Asia, you know, Japan, Taiwan, China, because the money is there. People are prepared to pay for coffee. Whereas, you know, the US and Australia, we haven't really educated our clients to pay for quality coffee. And I think that's the crux of the biscuit. Like, you know, we have this mindset of it being a lowly beverage that you just consume 3 or 4 of them a day, almost to get you through.
$5 a fucking pop. It's like, it's not a cheap fucking thing, mate.
No, that's right. So, like, you know, and the thing with Australia, like, you know, $5 US, you know, sort of equates to probably about $7.50 Australian. So coffee here is sold for around $4 Australian for, you know, a latte.
Yeah.
$4.50 in Melbourne, probably $4 in Sydney, and probably less around, you know. So you can see, you know, that not really being representational of what the product should be worth, you know, from the point of the handling and the quality and all that sort of stuff. So,
Go on, sorry.
Coke. You go and buy Coke for $4. You know,
yeah.
I was out the other night, and there's like just a bottle of Coke, which is $4. So I'm like, you know, this is the problem.
It must be a kick in the teeth for the producer when we're selling a cup of coffee for more than what they're getting for a pound of it.
Definitely. Yeah, it's hard. Like, I think, you know, what needs to happen is we need to really look at, you know, what is going to take them to really progress and really look at, you know, a future in coffee. And I think for us, we need to really focus on, you know, I suppose putting our best foot forward in the way that we actually promote coffee, the way that we really, you know, sell it.
Yeah, and I guess what we didn't say here today, which is the obvious thing, that if we don't do this, people are going to stop farming coffee and farms things that are much more profitable because they've got to feed their families.
Well, there's climate change, you know, there's all those, you know, factors on that. There is, you know, obviously a lot of children from the producers don't want to work in coffee, you know, because it is a very, you know, unprofitable business and things like that. You know, their expectations as kids are a lot higher than what their, you know, parents were. So you've got that dynamic. You've got people not wanting to pick coffee. Like, you know, at the farm in Honduras, we have trouble getting pickers. You know, we have.
Why?
You know, just because.
Labor?
It's just, yeah, just like there's not enough people to pick coffee, and you know, even paying them above and beyond does not guarantee them to turn up. You know, so there's problems. You know, so there's all those things, and I think, you know, as a little roaster in Melbourne, Australia, who's, you know, having all these, you know, problems at the moment just in regards to costs and things like that. Like, cafes aren't making money here, you know, just because of the amount of cafes on the ground, the dynamic with wage costs and costs going up, that people realize, like, fuck, you know, how can I get money out of this? And the first thing they do is cut their green costs or cut their roasted coffee costs down to manage. Like, they're not really understanding, because, you know, coffee costs usually come in weekly. Like, you know, I'm buying, you know, 35 kilos of coffee this week, you know, and because it arrives as a weekly bill, it's a very easy bill to look at and see and say, fuck, I've got to cut that down.
Yeah.
It's a little more difficult to go through your food costs or, you know, costs of, you know, wage costs, all that stuff, and really look at it in a formula to see that all that is tracking correctly as well. So a lot of people in business don't really have those skills to really look at their business correctly. With coffee costs and try and cut it out.
So with regards to you guys, 7 Seeds as a wholesale, with a wholesale program, I can't imagine it's easy to compete when you have this approach and other people are just trying to sell the cheapest shit that they can.
Well, we considered not doing wholesale. We considered stopping wholesale because at the moment, there does appear to be that race to the bottom. You know, it's all price focused. And I think it's probably, I think we need to just chill out and just continue what we're doing rather than put the walls up. But for us, you know, obviously a retail environment where you can sell your coffee to someone who's a home user or whatever for a margin that's going to, you know, be profitable rather than price to cafe or well. You know, I think that's a really good option to look at. But the reality is that there is still people out there who are in, you know, cafe world who really do want to use good products and do understand what's happening. Like, we don't want to put our prices up. We want to maintain our approach to giving producers what we feel is, you know, a great price for them to continue farming. Like the relationships we have with Guatemala, we've worked with our producers there for around 7 years.
That's great.
In Ethiopia, we've always had trouble with Ethiopia. We set an office up there a couple of years ago from a couple of people who were leaving Technoserve. So they have their own little operation there, and they're working there. And that was our approach to trying improving our relationship with Ethiopia. Honduras have had a relationship there for a long, long time. Brazil, we work with Silvio, who I've met through Cup of Excellence, and he's the BSCA president. So we have a great relationship with our Brazilian producers. So it's really important to, I think, have that relationship and sort of, celebrate, I suppose, a little bit of that, of their coffee. And for us, I think it's really important to really try and change coffee, for the better. If you could have this, digital approach to buying coffee, if you could look at, having it transparent, imagine how many lives you could change, around the world, and it's not a lot of money. You know what I mean? It's actually just an approach where, your coffee can be verified as being a great coffee to, feel, good about drinking it because it is helping things out. You could probably look at, the producer and have direct, insight into that sort of, where that coffee's from. It would be, a lot more, educational, if you wanted to go there, like, a lot of, consumers just want to drink a good coffee.
Right.
Which I think it's going to do that. But if you did want to explore it, I think, we have all that sort of stuff in place. It would be great to have sort of a movement heading towards that where, the producer's invited to the retail world a little more and can share a little bit of the good, I
love that idea. We hear about barista exchanges, we hear about coffee exchanges, people hosting each other's coffee in different countries. But this idea of bringing the people at origin into the back end of the experience, or the front end of the experience, and getting them to see exactly what it is like to have their coffee served. It's a whole new experience for the consumer and for the cafe staff.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be nice if it did. Do you know what I mean?
I don't know that it couldn't happen. I think it's right now there's not very much understanding of what the problem is, which is why I was so keen to have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
When I put your article up, a fuck ton of people read it.
Yeah.
And started asking me questions about it. And you and I had this conversation. I think what the issue is that people don't really understand that our supply chain is in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And if they understand the situation and the circumstance under which we're at, we as a community can rally when we want to, but we just need to give a fuck.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I think it just needs to be honest. Like, commodity coffee isn't going to go away. And I think that's fine, but if you're really focused and you're expecting people to recognize you as a coffee professional who classes themselves as being, interested in the future and wanting coffee to be sustainable and really being a good positive influence for producers and things like that, you can't buy, commodity coffee and trade it as specialty, in your retail outlet. I think that's unfair and unjust, And I think, specialty needs, I don't think we should be using specialty. I think it's been overused way too much, and I think it's just been usurped by everyone. I think there needs to be a new dynamic in regards to what, that high-end coffee is, or what it is.
I guess it was interesting when people started saying the word specialty, define what specialty means. And I remember thinking, well, specialty means it scores 85 and above, doesn't it? And then people started saying, but no, like there's specialty cafes and Starbucks buys specialty coffee. And I'm like, this word is getting very confused. There's a whole ton of things that we're using for this word specialty that now it's become convoluted into a whole bunch of different ideas. And so I think you're right. We need to have a word that represents what we mean by what we're trying to deliver.
Yeah. Well, to me, it was like, anyone who said, in the early days, it was like anyone who says specialty, show me the specialty. I want to see that. I want to see your process in regards to buying this. I want to see, but to me, it should be almost about economics, because like, I don't want to fuck with anyone's idea of what good coffee is. Like, the Taiwanese are drinking naturals over there and digging them and paying, some really funky naturals, which I just love. And
I'm a natural fan, so I think everyone should buy good naturals.
Yeah, but like, you know what I mean? Like, there's these areas the world was drinking the same coffee. I want to see a world which really enjoys a lot of different aspects of coffee and things like that, but has a basic belief system in regards to actually, when they're saying that they're actually supporting coffee at a high-end level, that firstly, it actually creates a future for that coffee by rewarding the producer enough money to invest in the farm, fertilizer, and going forward. That it really encourages, people in that coffee community to continue doing coffee, and feel that it's a value to, to them and to us,
It's really interesting, this idea of the word specialty, because after I posted your article, someone asked me about this. I'm holding up an Elixir bottle and we call it Elixir Specialty Coffee, right?
Yeah.
And they said, well, then why did you call it Elixir Specialty Coffee? And I was thinking back to the time when I named it. And the thing was, this is a specialty product.
Yeah.
When I named it Elixir Specialty Coffee, it wasn't necessarily about the fact that we use specialty coffee. It was about the idea that this is a bougie coffee. This is an affordable luxury item, and it's a specialty product.
Yeah.
And that was my approach. I guess that adds another dimension to this term specialty. I was thinking at it from something outside of coffee altogether.
Yeah.
And I copped a little bit of flack over that, no doubt. We're going to talk about that in a minute.
Sorry, Lee. But yeah. And it's like, I suppose it is just my world. Like, I'm very, just focused on the area that I'm working in. And I wasn't supposed to offend. Like, a lot of people have said it's just a cliche that you've, offended a lot of people by saying this. And I don't know why, realistically, that, it's just something I feel is true. Like, I think specialty is dead, if you want to use it in a term that I originally thought it was meant for. High quality coffee that was actually traded at a level that the farmer would be able to survive.
We've exhausted the term. We've used it in every single fucking way we could, and now we've lost the essence of it. We've bastardized it.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely.
So I'm right there with you. It was really refreshing, and I got to thank you, Mark, because you really helped me start to look at what I was feeling. I was quite confused, and I started to feel some sort of discomfort with this understanding of specialty. And then when I read your article, I'm like, this explains what I'm feeling. And it got me thinking about it, and I thought, excuse me, we need to start thinking about how we're going to fashion the future of our industry. If Starbucks is using specialty coffee and specialty cafes or third wave cafes are using specialty coffee, we fucking exhausted the hell out of this term, and we've got no way to help our customers and consumers actually start discerning what we mean by that. And we're not showing up as professionals with regards to supporting the people who are supplying us with the product that we're selling.
That's right. Well, I think, that's right. That's it in a nutshell. And the trouble is that the people who are doing quite well are people who are buying very cheap coffee and masking it as, especially because of the price point here in Australia, because, cafes aren't doing so well. But to me, it's just, I suppose, acknowledging really what's happening. The Melbourne coffee scene is going backwards in regards to quality, definitely. I think no one's really talking about that. No one's really willing to say, what's going on in regards to this dynamic, because I think people are very, it's no one really comments. No one's really critical of the coffee industry in regards to saying that's shit or, this is not the right way to do it. But I think we need to actually start being like that to really help, some of the broken things in coffee. And to me, I think, the coffee C price at $1.07,
that's appalling.
The benefits for, coffee producers being no better than 20, 30 years ago, even 40 years ago, is a real issue that, no one's really talking about, you know, what show you go to, there's really not a lot of, process back to the producer. Like you'll have the country, booths there showcasing their coffees and stuff like that. But, no one's really talking about, I think this crisis in coffee where if we don't do something, we're in deep shit.
You to me have always been that guy that's the first to say shit that everyone's too difficult to say, finds too difficult to say, and you do the things that nobody else is doing before. That was why a couple of years ago I did reach out and ask you to be my mentor, which I was really thrilled that you said yes to, because I was experiencing a bunch of, as you well know, I was experiencing a lot of grievances around the way I was being perceived in the industry and the things that I was doing. And I knew after talking to you that you were experiencing a lot of the same things, or had in the past. And this is just another one of those things where you're starting to say the things that people are uncomfortable with hearing. And no doubt you'll cop a fuck ton of shit over it, and will continue to, because it's cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I think it's like, that's okay. I don't mind a little bit of shit.
Yep.
And the reality is that, I think it's important to have that out there and people talking about it. I'd rather that than no one talking about it and for 100%. It to all go away. So, like, to me, I'm happy with it. Happy with it to,
Yep.
So, and I'm, old
You've
enough
got thick skin now.
I've got very thick skin now. But that's
I can't wait till that happens to me.
Yeah.
I'm learning more and more every time I have a conversation with you. You give me these little gems where you're like, why don't you go do this? And why don't you think about this? But I feel like if, talking about that whole thing, if the Melbourne coffee scene doesn't want to talk about the fact that the industry is moving backwards, what do they suffer from having these conversations? Don't we help each other when we start talking about this shit?
I think, definitely. I think the hard thing is that no one really wants to talk about, there's been a wage crisis in Melbourne. There's been a lot of, people were underpaying people in the industry for quite a long time. And it was a very common thing because it was very confusing. The whole wage thing with,
what award are you on?
And what award are you on? But also, contracts and all that sort of stuff. And then what's happened recently is everyone's really had to knuckle down and look at paying, the correct award rate, which is very, very clear now. So that equates to, like, on a public holiday, $53 for the dishwasher. You have to pay your dishy $53 an hour.
Are you hearing that, America?
which is a lot of, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. And so what's happened is, places have closed on public holidays. You can't trade, or cafes and restaurants are putting 15, 20% surcharge on and things like that, because the reality is that people aren't making money. That the dynamic has shifted. From when I got in the industry, everyone was paying cash for a coffee. A cafe that was being busy and run quite well would, if you're working hard on everything, your costs, you'd probably be getting 10%, profit. Like, I think the average in Australia, someone was telling me, is around 3%, profit, 4%. But then you get the bank that comes in and, everyone starts using your card. And so the bank are clipping you like 1 to 1.5% just for that transaction, which is almost a half of your profit if you're not a great performing cafe. So basically everyone's starting to really, the cost of running a cafe is higher. All those little things have crept in. And so now it's very difficult. And the thing with Melbourne was that there was a huge boom in cafes. Everyone wanted to do it. Yeah. People were doing fit outs worth $2 million.
Fuck.
And now you cannot pay that money back. So, there's, I don't know how many cafes would be on the market in Melbourne at the moment, but there would be a hell of a lot of cafes on the market, not being able to sell. So you have a dynamic of probably, you probably have I don't know what's a vision of the future for a lot of, especially coffee places or whatever, or, towns or cities or whatever. But you can see that it's got to the tipping point, in Melbourne where now you're seeing people giving cafes away. We've had a couple of people call us saying, "Can you take over my cafe?" And it's like, no, dude, because it's losing money.
Yeah. Wow.
So so there's those things. So people are in survival mode a little bit. But that, like we've just been through a boom. We've just been through 15 years of boom or whatever. And the thing is that
the market's correcting itself.
Yeah, the producer still hasn't done very well out of that. So what's it going to be like when it all turns to shit? You know what I mean? And we can see that, and that's why I'm focused. Like, to me, I think cafes are still great, and there's still a great cafe culture in Melbourne, and there's some people doing some really great things, but they're really good operators who know what they're doing. And I think you have to be focused like that and really understand your business and be, in it fairly deep and understand, everything. Mm-hmm. And I think you can still operate paying product. I think, that's what we need to send out a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I can't imagine how brutal it would be for somebody who's, because I get this story all the time. I'm always getting people here in the States quitting a corporate job saying, "Hey, I've heard about you and I want you to help me. I want you to consult for me. I want you to help me open a cafe." And I can't imagine in Melbourne how brutal that would be for someone who knows zero about opening a cafe, trying to compete in that market right now as an operator.
Yeah. It's like, I just would not. Well, I think it's, like there's quite a few people who've done it, and I think you're getting that type of operator coming into the market now because of the vibe and the persona that it sends out. And the trouble is, it's like anyone who's got experience is just going nowhere near it. You know what I mean? Like another cafe, fuck no.
Yes. Cosimo was saying that in Sydney, the turnover for a new business. Oh, sorry, mate. We had a bit of a glitch there. Cosimo was saying about a month ago on the podcast that the cafes in Sydney are turning over within 2 years.
Yeah. So, there's issues for sure. But the thing is that the people coming in really don't have this experience. So you have this dynamic of where they're looking at the books and they're going to want to make money. They don't really understand coffee. So someone wanders in saying selling specialty coffee for $22, or $20 a kilo, or $34 a kilo. Who are you going to go for? It
seems like a no-brainer, but it's all muddled up in a whole bunch of other complex issues.
So, but like, I don't want to paint a bleak picture, but it's just a classic environment of when you have a group of businesses that have gone through a boom and things like that, and then it's over the tipping point. So you can see that happening, definitely.
Why do we see some farms that have helicopters and have a fuck ton of opulence?
Who's got the helicopters?
In Brazil, I see a bunch of those.
So Brazil has been going through a few hard times just because of the the currency exchange and things like that. Mm-hmm. But mechanized producers, which are large companies, they can produce coffee for a lot less than what your little Guatemalan dude can in Tenango. So it's just that. It's just economies of scale. So, if you look at those sort of operations, that's a commodity market that the Brazilians are working at. Yet, the Brazilians are extremely good at what they do. And like looking at some of the processing that they're doing, they're producing some stunning coffees. Cupping some coffees out of Brazil recently, it's unbelievable. So they're ahead of the game a little. So you're looking at some of these producing countries that are, have real problems because it is such a hand to basket, basket to fermentation tank, and then hand processed pretty much, on the patio, on the drying beds and turned over, all that sort of stuff. And then, through the mill and, all that sort of stuff going to where when we finally get our hands on it, it's going to be hard for that to survive, if we don't really look at it and have an approach that celebrates that hand process. That really looks at quality and really values the product for what it is.
I've been wondering recently why the coffee industry hasn't mechanized like other agricultural products?
Well, it has in Brazil, but basically most coffee is grown on a fairly steep, mountainsides. Like usually if you look around, you can see the volcano and you're above, 1,200 meters, and someone's got a really good idea on how to grow coffee. The coffee's going to be pretty good,
Yeah.
They've got the right varietals, but Colombia, it's steep, it's, remote, in a lot of places, and it has to be handpicked. So these areas, aren't for mechanization. So, and you're looking at a lot of people like, the FNC in Colombia who are putting a lot of time into different varietals and production. A lot of it hasn't been focused on quality in the cup. So it's about, how much a plant can produce and things like that. So
quantity over quality, is that the kind of thing?
And if you really look at the amount of diversity in genetics in coffee, it's very, very small. Like it's almost unsustainable when you look at it from, a scientific point of view. So we really need to, being a coffee guy, I really want to celebrate diversity. I want to taste all these different little varietals that are around. I want to celebrate these different tastes. I really want to showcase to people and build an excitement about this product that people are really willing to pay for, really willing to experience. I want people to enjoy it. So I have to be on my game with roasting and selecting and doing all that sort of stuff. And I think you really need to be focused on that, and really get into it. I think if you're just going to do a brand, if you're going to do, Mark's Coffee Shop, and it's going to be about Mark who's roasting and not so much about that, I don't believe that's good. I don't believe that's the way to go forward for the product.
You've at least got to have the majority of the focus. I mean, branding's important. You have done some stunning jobs, you and Lisa, with regards to the way that you brand all of your shit, like from the hotel to the cafes to everything. Everything's beautifully branded. But the difference is, with regards to you guys, it's still, even though it's beautifully done, it's still not center stage. The coffee is, for me, the coffee is always center stage. And I think you guys have figured out the balance between that. The food everywhere that I've eaten in your establishments has also always been on point. I mean, you guys were figuring it out in LA, and that was an interesting journey just because of the difference. And I remember speaking to you about that when I came in. But at all your other venues that I've been to, the food was always on point. The coffee was always on point, and the customer experience was always on point. They were the focuses. And the branding was something that was more in the background, but beautifully done without needing a fanfare. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know whether I totally agree with you, but I'm not going to argue.
You wouldn't.
The thing,
you're always the last person to agree with anyone that says anything nice about what you do.
I think it's always been good to be fairly. We've never had to really talk about ourselves. So so I think it's always been nice to have that opportunity, not to have to talk about yourself. But I've been around for a long time, and now I suppose I probably do need to express a little bit more about what I think and things like that to our brand a little bit, because I feel that it's just important. I think nowadays, just with a lot more sort of traffic and things like that, I think people still need to focus back on the essence of what is important with coffee, and it is coffee.
What do you say is the common thread between everything that you've done?
I think it's very service orientated. Like to me, it's a really like service has to be, very approachable, but also very considered. It needs to focus back onto the product, whether it's food, whether it's coffee. I think people need to be informed about what's happening and why we're different, or why we're doing things, like the way we are.
I definitely get that feel from all of the places of yours that I've been to. I felt that when I went to PCP on Fairfax for the first time, that was the first time that I felt that it was a struggle for you guys to deliver on the vision, purely because it was a whole new culture and what we're used to in Australia versus what the talent and I don't mean to offend anyone, and I'm sure I will, and I'll get some fucking interesting emails from this, but on what the talent could deliver, on what you were trying to, the vision that you were trying to produce. Is that fair, a fair statement, or am I being unfair there?
Maybe a little, I don't know. Like, to me, I think it's always hard to really, like, I think the dynamic is very difficult, you know, working in a hospitality industry and things like that. And I think you have to be very honest with your approach. Like, I think it has to relate back to you and what you want. I think it really needs to be, like, I think a lot of people come into the industry wanting to copy something else or look at other aspects of it. But I think it really should be about you or how you want to be treated when you walk into a place. Or, you know, it's the same approach for the hotel. The hotel's just based on us. You know, it's not based on wanting to do something like the Ace Hotel or wanting to do something like the Hyatt. It's about what we enjoy when we go to a hotel. Like, I want to be able to walk in and someone's not at a screen punching in while you're waiting to check in. Like, who's the most important person here? It's your client. And I want, you know, if I'm in somewhere, I don't want to wake up in the middle of the night thinking, where the fuck am I? You know, I want to be able to know exactly where I am by what the room looks like. You know what I mean? I want it to have a little bit of what's going on in that city or town or resort or whatever in that room. I want to feel Sydney, you know, when I'm in Paramount House Hotel. You know,
I can't wait to see it.
And I want to be immersed in the culture of the, you know, so all those little things that we, you know, really enjoyed when we were actually, you know, traveling or, you know, and there's some great places, you know, at different origins, you know, that really, you know, are really quite nice and really involve you in that. And we really sort of enjoyed that. So it's a very honest approach. And I think that comes back to running a business, you know, what do you really like, you know? You know, I think some of the hard things now is that, you know, wage costs are becoming so high that, you know, the service model in Australia, I don't think people will really be prepared to pay for, you know, because that's, you know, it's getting to such a level that people are starting to have, you know, no table service, you know, they're having more of an order at the counter, a little bit more sort of US style in a lot of cafe environments.
I was I did an Instagram live the other day talking about this no table service thing. We experience a lot of it over here in the US. And I just feel like we're missing the mark. When a customer comes in, they place their order, they sit down with whoever they're with, having a business meeting, or they're meeting up with a friend. And then they've got to listen out for Alana, coffee for Alana, and they miss it. You know, I feel like, are we really delivering on the customer service experience there when a customer needs to stop their conversation to get up and get their own fucking coffee? Like, are we really thinking about this the right way? And I feel like we're not really delivering on what we want people to come to our places for. I get it. We need to save on wages, and I don't have a solution. Right now I'm thinking about the fact
I think it's hard when you look at, it's really getting people willing to pay for, you know, what that is, you know, what that service is. You know, like, I think service, you know, is really good in Australia. Most places that you go into is very directed and very friendly and really bang on.
Yeah.
But we've got to a level now where, you know, a lot of the costs involved in running a business are basically based on, you know, the structure of that business, not so much, you know, food-wise and things like that. Like, I think, you know, you go and have breakfast somewhere in Melbourne and it's $28 for eggs Benedict or something. And people just can't do that. You know what I mean?
It's not a reasonable ask either. In my opinion, you know, maybe once on a Sunday or something like that, but to get people to come in every day and get peanut butter toast for $12, fuck that.
No,
it's not okay.
And that's sort of what's happening a little bit. So, you know, what can you do?
Is it a situation where the demand for baristas, because everyone's always looking for good baristas and they're always able to ask? I mean, last I heard, the average wage for barista in Sydney was between $25 and $30 an hour. Yep,
that would be right. Yep, definitely.
Is it going too high?
No, I don't think so. I think, No, I don't think so in regards to that. I think if you could, like, I think it does get difficult when, if you get to a level where, so like wages are very high in Australia. So, you
Yeah.
know, you're looking at other wages and people are like, why shouldn't a barista get that? But the difficult thing is that we should be spending $5 on a coffee. So we should be charging $7.
Yeah.
Australian for a coffee. That's basically it. The barista should be getting is, you know, $27.50, which is probably around, you know, average wage for a barista, you know, on a ward, including, you know, working on the weekend, you know, a day on the weekend. And I think that's the way it should be. So, but I think the problem is us promoting that coffee correctly, so that, you know, we can return. So we can charge $7, not charge $4, pay the barista his $27, but not pay the producer his $3.50 a pound. You know what I mean?
And the owner's not walking away with enough money to feel a little less stress either.
Well, I think it's, you know, the difficult thing with being an owner of cafes is that if you put a significant investment into it, I think nowadays it's very difficult to get that back. And I think people are starting to realize that. So, you know, people think, you know, that you're doing really well as, you know, someone who's been working in coffee for a long, long time. And, you know, yeah, I think we're probably just the same as a normal office worker you know, after a while, and being considered as being extremely successful in the coffee business, you know, I don't think it's truly reflective in a monetary way. So, yeah.
Not at all. When people say to me, you know, I want to open a cafe, can you please help me open a cafe?
Yeah.
My first thing to them is, I want you to put this on hold for 12 months and I want you to go work as a barista on the weekends. Keep your day job and go and get a job as barista 2 days a week. You're going to be working 7 days a week. That's what it's going to be when you have your own business. So you should get used to that. Get
used to that. Bang a few out on the weekends. And see whether you enjoy it. I think it's great advice.
And I think, look, the return, the people who have started doing that and have come back to me and said, I had no idea how hard it is to do the whole cafe thing. It's not just being a barista that's difficult. It's the things that everyone in the cafe has to juggle, watching all the little expenses that you just have to give away for.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's been heartbreaking to watch people fold their businesses after 6 months who didn't do that. Yeah,
it's an easy way to blow your cash, that's for sure. Yeah, and I don't know what to say.
Do you think that for you the success came from timing and just hanging back a little bit and doing things differently to the way that other people did them?
I think it was timing, definitely. I think it was right place, right time. Yeah, I'd say that's probably it. Like, I think, you know, I was lucky to be in a position where no one else had really done anything. And was just directed into doing it. So I don't think it's any special skills, for sure. I don't think, you know, but I think I'd been a fine artist for 8 years. I studied fine art, and so I was extremely poor. I'd, you know, lived pretty rough for a little while, and so I was sort of ready for, you know,
being able to pay your bills.
Well, it didn't worry me. Like, having them, I'd been there before and it was fine. I, you know, didn't have a hard time. You know, so for me it was, I think I was lucky to have that, you know. And I actually, when I first came out of, you know, school, I actually did have a degree in applied science, which I hated at the time, but it did come in. It did come in handy when I started roasting coffee.
Well, that's awesome. I didn't know that you had a degree in applied science.
Yeah, so that's what I did when I first came out of high school. I went to university and studied environmental science and went through all that, and then came out and hated any job that it gave to me. So yeah, I went and studied fine art. So it was good. It was good to have that, you know, sort of background, and I sort of think it stood me in good stead.
You being someone who innovates, you being someone who does shit different to the way that everybody does it. And you're known for being that person in the Australian coffee industry. What do you think it is about that causes people to want to talk shit about everything that you'll do?
I don't know. I think it's hard. I think you're always going to have haters, aren't you? So
I don't know. I mean, I remember when you and I first started talking about this, and I was, seeking advice from you about how I could handle what was going on with me for Elixir. And I couldn't get my head around why it was happening to me because I just didn't understand the behavior. I don't understand why the haters need to exist.
Yeah.
Why do you think, I mean, for fuck's sake, it's coffee. Like,
I think initially people thought I was very, I think they just felt I was very disrespectful for just thinking that he bros coffee. And I probably was, who knows?
Why? Because you're a white guy? And you weren't Italian or anything like that?
Well, no, just because I think they felt that I had to go through, them to a certain extent. Whereas I went to the US and a lot of, so I think there was a lot of people who thought I was being disrespectful a little bit. I don't know whether it was disrespectful or, who is this dude? What's he doing? Why does he think and I didn't profess to know, I've never professed to be an expert or anything like that. I'm just doing my thing, But a lot of people see that as offensive, I suppose, from the point of view of someone going out and doing, this new cafe where they're roasting for themselves and putting it to the client, all that sort of stuff. Like I think with the Paramount thing, it was a really, nice project to be involved with and getting people in and stuff like that. And I think like a lot of people just hated it, because it was just something that was different. Why would you do that? Why would you turn your cafe over to Coffee Collective for a week for them to run?
Yeah.
I think to a certain extent, it took a lot of guts to do stuff like that. And
hell yes.
And I think it took a disrespect of money, and this is my, hark back to being, a fine artist where I, survived on pretty much no money. Like any of those things didn't worry me. Like doing a business where, money wasn't a goal was fairly easy for me. And there's a story there. Like initially when we set that up, it was designed not to make any money. And I wasn't, I was setting it up to explore. And the owner of, the building, I said, look, we don't want to worry about the finances. We just want to do it. And you can handle all that. That's all yours. Which he agreed to. And then 12 months later came back with a lease and an agreement to give us the business.
Shit.
So,
wow.
So it was good. It was really, really, and so that's how, it progressed through to being involved with him and doing the hotel and things like that. But originally it was an idea that was supposed to be just a bit, an interesting approach to coffee and exploring areas that we hadn't sort of explored so much. So, and, the international community is really exciting, I think. People are doing great stuff, to have, G&B come out and do their thing, to have Coffee Collective come out and run the bar like a Danish, approach was fucking great for the people of Sydney. And I think for people who are in coffee, like to me, I've always been a little bit, wary of people who don't get behind the bar and make coffee or do this. Yes. Like people who are saying stuff, people who are experts and saying, I can do this and it's bang. And it's like, do 900 of them behind the bar and I have a shift. You're going to win my support,
Yeah.
And so,
show up, motherfucker.
yeah. Hey, Klaus, you got to deal with Barry, who comes in every morning at 8:25, and once
and he gives no fucks about who you are in the coffee world.
Yeah. And I think it was exciting for people who came,
Yeah.
To really interact with a different, instantly you're in a cafe that's in Sydney, which is busy, and you're from LA, and you've got to produce coffee that is acceptable. And that was great. That was, it was so enjoyable to be able to do that. And I don't think, anyone had done it before, and anyone's done it since,
Are you guys looking to learn stuff as well as experience stuff?
Oh, no, it was fantastic to see the way people, ran their bar, the type of drinks, everything about it was really, really exciting. We lost money. We lost a lot of money doing it. And
but some projects are going to do that. Like you've got loads of projects going on, and so some of them cover the others.
That's right. So for us, but like, you know, pisses people off a little bit.
Say that again, Mark. Sorry, I missed you there.
Well, I think that pisses people off, being, you know, doing things like that. That is fairly left of center, and it's probably, you know, is it a little disrespectful of, you know, people out there working day in, day out in a cafe? Like, I'm sure there's probably a few people who would like to do that, but physically can't do it.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I wonder if people I wonder if the haters, and again, you and I have spoken about this off air, but I wonder if the haters are really hating because they're not the ones that are doing it.
I don't know. Let's not worry about the haters. The haters can sort themselves out, I reckon.
I feel like because I experienced the same thing in my music career as well as in Elixir. And I guess I'm looking for a utopia where people who do innovative shit don't have to put up with that kind of behavior, because there's enough to battle as it is. And I feel like we as a coffee industry, we look to dislike people that are doing things differently. And I want to be somebody who calls that out a lot and tells people to stop being assholes about it. If somebody does something different, try and find a way to support them rather than shit all over them, because I promise you the journey that they're going on to have the balls to do what they're doing is fucking terrifying enough and exhausting enough that they don't have to deal with you hiding behind your computer screen saying shit online about them.
Yeah. Well, it's a very easy world to be negative. You know, that's the thing. You know, it's quite easy to be, you know, negative. And I think it's a lot of, thanks, you know, like I think you really, to continue on and do your thing and, you know, go forward and produce new stuff or whatever, it's always difficult. So, yeah, and I think, you know, to me, it's just about, I suppose, being honest to yourself about what you're doing, whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. And sometimes you do good, sometimes you do bad, sometimes everything's not successful. And it's just a journey, you know, you've got to go on. I think you've just got to keep yourself happy. Like, you know, with the specialty is dead thing, I probably wish that the tweet wasn't picked up as much as what it has been, because it has created quite a little bit of, but like, you know, in other words, you know, like I do really feel that we do need to do something. It's probably sidetracked me a little bit with other things that are on the go, but it's really important. I just wish people would be honest about their approach, and really say what they're doing and be, you know, willing to stand up for what they've done and what they're, you know, that's the main thing. And I see that as a problem in the industry big time, that people are, you know, masquerading a little bit. And I think, yeah, that's why I don't really...
Go on, sorry.
Who do I think?
Well, who do you think takes? Let's not make this podcast episode.
No, exactly.
Who do you think is going to be charged with creating this thing? Is it a new?
It annoys me that specialty coffee associations or whoever really don't have a focus on protecting this thing.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing. I think, you know, barista championships and all that stuff are great, but, you know, they're not changing anything at producing level, you know. Not really, like.
No, I feel like it's a show where they say, look, I went to the farm and I picked the cherries myself and I'm showcasing this coffee and that coffee. I'm like,
I think it would really be good to really focus on, you know, that little aspect for a little while and have some people really look at it. And I think, all that sort of stuff, you know, all these things, which is huge, you know, and has huge amounts of money poured into it, and sponsorship deals, like, you know, you're looking at coffee machines, you know, the amount of money spent on coffee machines that go into, you know, and changes in that technology, you know, latte art smackdowns and celebrations and all that sort of stuff. It really does need to include what's happening at Origin. You know, I think there's been a huge thing at our level, and I think it's always hard to relate that back to, you know, farm level or anything like that. And to a certain extent, we don't really know a lot about that. What really would be a great way to get them excited and get them rewarded. But I think, transparency and understanding what everyone's doing at the moment is a key step forward. But also, I think, the reality is that it's going to show everyone what's happening in the marketplace and initiate change from that.
I really hope this doesn't go into the too hard basket for the industry, because it has the potential to.
Yeah, it's true.
And I was saying to you when we were talking last time about, like, how do we make this happen? Because I want to make sure that if we need to speak to the right people.
Yeah, I reckon, something like Cropster, a platform like that where people are roasting, and it has a farming component, would be a great way to actually set up making, a digital contract where there could be transparency both ways, where you could really trace it through. I think, having some, key roasters in specific locations who adopt a process like that would be great, and really look at either a mark or a brand or just 3 words or something like that promoted something like that is possible. I think it's just about people having the time to set it up and follow through.
Could a worldwide database do something?
Well, I think you can do that with something like Cropster. Like, I don't want to promote any product or anything, but Cropster has a fairly good take-up with roasters. Yeah. And I think it would be a good way to really trace it all the way through. I can see it being fairly easy for someone like that to do that. But, of course, anything digital like that would be great. Like, they have their auction platform on. I'm sure it could be adopted fairly easily to a digital thing.
The only problem with that is it becomes a thing that only people who use Cropster are being transparent. Well, I think people who don't want to be transparent just won't use Cropster.
Well, maybe you could look at, Cropster doing it for a as a non-profit or something like that. I don't know. But, like, to me, I just see excitement in using technology that's available to us now. Yeah. That really starts to enable trade across the globe, that being a little more sort of easy. Like, the whole contracts system and things like that's pretty whack,
Because it's not standardized?
No, I just think because it's quite old school, and the whole idea of all that is just, fairly difficult to negotiate from if you're looking at trying to track what's happened to that coffee from a price point of view. Like, there's going to be a lot of pushback from people who are involved in that chain. But I think even those people now are realizing that there needs to be a change in the way coffee's traded, because it's going to help them. Yeah.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time, because I know that you're running a fuck ton of businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But I do have a question that I've always wanted to ask. Here it comes. How do you deal with shit that doesn't go the way that you want it to go?
Well, I think you have to be fairly realistic in regards to looking at it. And sometimes you just get things wrong. Sometimes it takes a lot of work. And I think it's, it just takes a lot of work to get things back in the groove. I think you have to, again, approach it honestly. So, yeah, I think that's the hard thing. Sometimes it's exactly the same as anyone else. It just hasn't worked. You've got to, slink away and put your, tail between your legs a little bit. Yeah.
Do you take it as like a personal hit when something doesn't go right, or are you water off a duck's back kind of a leader?
No, well, I think you have to take things personally. Definitely, I think everyone should. I think before you open anything or launch anything or do anything, if you're not scared shitless, there's something wrong.
Right.
If you're not, really, really worried, I think that's not going to go that well. Do you know what I mean? If you're overconfident, we've got this in the bag, I think that's when shit starts to get real. So
do you still have that though? Even when you're like
big time. Yeah,
great.
Big time.
It's so good to know.
Big time. It's like
I'm always shitting my pants and I'm like, am I the only one who does?
No, I think you really do have to, be really, really worried. Yeah. So yeah.
On that note, Great advice. It's been awesome chatting to you. Thank you again. If anyone wants to hit you up on social media, where do they find you?
Triclops on Instagram. I'm on Facebook.
I tried to find you on Instagram. I couldn't. Triclops, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Love that.
And Twitter. I don't use Twitter so much. Who does?
Twitter's a bitch fest. That's why you shouldn't use Twitter. It's a mob of bitches. That's not conducive.
Honestly, I shouldn't say I hate LinkedIn, but I hate LinkedIn. It's such a sausage fest. And
it really is.
And the Deadpool 2 quote about got to get back on LinkedIn, I think sums up the whole thing, really.
Yeah, so, and we're encouraging baristas to get on there because we're trying to get them to be a little more professional and have a presence and do that kind of thing.
I think from my LinkedIn, I thought no one would really actually take any notice. That's why. That
was your strategy. Sorry, I fucked that up for you.
No, that's all right. All right.
Thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate it.
Great to talk.
Talk to you soon. Take care, mate. Bye.